I was walking home from the late shift, Chicago wind knifing through my cheap jacket, when I heard a body hit concrete behind me. That sound. You don't forget once you've heard it, and I turned because I know what it feels like when nobody turns for you. A man in a gray overcoat crumpled by the bus stop, eyes blown wide, chest not moving, and my hands just did what they were taught to do, 2 fingers to the neck. Speed dial St. Lawrence and 63rd. Send an ambulance now. I'm on my knees counting compressions and whispering, "Stay with me, sir, stay with me." And when the EMTs slid in like they'd rehearsed it, their whole lives, the nurse with the braids looked up and said, "You're the one who found him, ride with us if you can." And I did knees knocking the whole way because I was just a waitress with a grease-stained apron and a rent notice folded in my pocket. You know what I mean. In the ER I should have left, but the doors swallowed him whole and my feet wouldn't carry me out. And then the air shifted and in stormed a woman in a winter white coat, like the lights dimmed out, of respect for her chin, high pearls loud. She looked at me like I was a smudge on her sleeve and said, "What did you do to my son? Did you touch his wallet? People like you grab when they see an opening." And before I could say, "Compressions," her hand met my cheek. Clean crack, room silent, security moved. The nurse barked enough, and I stood there, palms open, fighting back. The old heat of being accused, being sized up, being told what I am. And I told myself, "Jasmine, you did what you came to do, go home." But then the doors opened, and the nurse said, "He's awake." He asked for the person who stayed, and I went in on legs that didn't belong to me. He looked smaller without the money draped on him, sorrow tucked under his eyes like permanent bruises. He said, "Thank you," in a voice that sounded cracked and honest. Told me his name was Graham Whitaker, asked if his associate could find me tomorrow, so he could thank me properly, and I wanted to say, "Keep your thanks. Tell your mother to keep her hands." But I said, "I'm glad you're breathing," and walked out into that wind with a cheek that pulsed and a heart that wouldn't slow. Yeah, that happened. Next morning, a man in a navy suit wandered into Lou's grill like he'd never met a pancake bigger than his hand and asked for Jasmine. Cole slid me a card that said, "Noah Park Office of the CEO, Whitaker," and Rowe handed me a second one with a room number and said, "Mr. Whitaker would like to see you." And when I told him your boss's mother slapped me, he said, "I'm sorry," like a man carrying a message he didn't write. And I said I'd think about it, even though the minute her hand met my face, I knew I was going to look her son in the eye and reclaim my name. The penthouse suite at St. Bartholomew didn't look like a hospital room. It looked like money learning how to whisper. Graham sat in a sweater instead of a gown. No performance, no cute lines. Just a man who'd run out of places to hide. I stood and said, "Your mother hit me," he said. "She was wrong, and she will apologize," I said. "I didn't come for that. I came to ask why you were dying on a sidewalk." And he told me straight. Wife and daughter gone on I-94 2 winters back. He kept breathing out of habit, not by choice, yesterday. His heart forgot which job to do and when. My hands pressed his chest. He heard a voice he'd buried. "You're not alone, and grief recognizes grief." So I sat, ate hospital salmon that tasted like it had beef with the oven. He asked about Mama's sciatica and my old dreams. I packed away when the money ran out. Then he said this thing no one had said to me since I was a kid. "You ever think about leading, not the lunch rush, real work, not charity, impact?" He was rebuilding the Whitaker Trust and wanted someone who knew how to hear what wasn't being said. And I laughed and told him, "You don't know me," and he said, "I know you stayed when you could have walked. That tells me everything." And I said, "Your mother would faint." He said, "She survived my marriage to a violinist. She'll live," and he slid a leather folder across the table like a DARE, Program Director, North Star Initiative. Living wage, full health care for me and Mama, autonomy and a mandate that fit my mouth. We don't save people, we stand with them. And I stared out at the lake hammered flat by wind and saw my reflection. A woman fresh out of reasons to be small, and I said, I have rules, no press circus, no poverty, pageants, we do receipts, not headlines, he said, done without checking with anybody because leaders don't. And I shook his hand and trembled anyway. First team meeting, I told them the truth. Our job isn't to be heroes, it's to get out of the way of people saving their own neighborhoods. And when the system locks the door, we kick. We mapped schools and met principals who built miracles out of paper clips. Work felt like breathing. With both lungs again, and then the storm found me. Because it always does, an article slid in like a smirk from waitress to Whitaker confidant. Who is Jasmine Cole? Anonymous quotes an old landlord complaining for the price of attention. A photo of Mama's building shot. Just right to make the cracked step the main character. You could smell the subtext. Black girl from 63rd takes an elevator she didn't earn, and Noah said, if we say nothing, they get louder. And Graham said, a statement will get twisted. And I went home and propped my phone on a stack of cookbooks and hit record, no makeup, no filter, just my kitchen light and my voice. My name is Jasmine. I scrubbed grease off diner floors. I didn't save a man because I knew his name, but because once someone saved me for no reason at all. I'm not here to play the part you wrote. I'm here to write my own. I posted it and turned off my phone, and by morning teachers and nurses and teenagers with torn backpacks were saying, we see you and support. Doesn't stop a hit job. It just gives it a front row audience, and soon somebody broke into North Star's server room and cut up our emails like ransom notes. Then came a whisper of an IRS tip with my name taped to it, a trap built to my size, and Graham wanted lawyers with sharp teeth. And I said, no, power is your language, mine is light. And we launched the ledger. Every dollar in and out color-coded, searchable, verified by a third party. We didn't pay people, called it reckless. Neighborhood folks called it respect. And the same anchors who enjoyed the smear had to run the sunlight, whether they liked the glare or not. Vivian. His mother asked to meet and walked in smelling like a museum and said, Ms. Cole, I let my fear speak in public. That's my shame, and I said I accept your apology, but understand I'm not staying because I was forgiven. I'm staying because I'm good at this, and something flickered in her face, not a hug, a ceasefire, and it would do. The ceasefire shattered when a hedge fund rival named Leon Mercer decided my existence made Graham inconvenient calls to reporters. A manufactured audit from a retired agent who knew which buttons to push, a packet of fakes, slid under a journalist's door like a dead fish. I've been hit before. I've never been hunted, there's a difference, and I put on a green dress that made me feel like a traffic light, and called a press conference. I said I won't waste your time, you want to know how I got here. I showed up when it was easier to stay home. I told the truth when lies had better lighting. I won't be shrunk to fit your story if the truth makes you uncomfortable. Good growth usually does, and I walked off, found a church, sat in the back, let a choir wash the dust off my chest. Then came the twist. You're waiting for a week before Christmas. An anonymous email carpet bombed every newsroom with forged records accusing me of embezzlement, and a condo I never owned. Lazy work, but it confirms what some folks want to believe, so it flies, Noah called at 6 a.m. and said it's everywhere. And my stomach dropped, and then steadied, because we'd been building in the open. For this exact reason, we expanded. The ledger to cover me every W-2, every tip claim from Lou's, every deposit that still smelled like bacon in PDF. The audit letter line by ridiculous line. The independent affidavit tracing the forgery back to the mercenary who got paid to smear me plain language because hidden truth doesn't save anybody. Then I went to New Hope Baptist and told the room what they already knew. They will try to drag you back to the version of yourself they can control, say thank you for the reminder of who you fight for, and keep walking. And the city did the rest. A small paper followed the wire transfers and turned the Whisper campaign into a headline with names and dates. Investors stepped back from Mercer, and suddenly I was meticulous, not manipulative. Funny how receipts change adjectives. At North Star, we got quiet again, which is another way to say work got done. A kid on the west side slid her failing geometry test into my bag and whispered, "Can you help Mama started painting again?" Because her new doctor listened instead of lectured. And one night, Graham stood in my doorway with a blue folder and said, "Co-chair 50%, not as a symbol, as structure." And I said, "No token titles." And he said, "Only work." And handed me a small box that wasn't a ring, a simple North Star pendant, something to touch when the room goes dark. And yeah, my hands shook, then steadied. I wish I could tell you the credits rolled, but life doesn't give you bow ties for free. 2 months after an award with a presidential signature, we got a subpoena because somebody still wanted to see me sweat. But when you build in the open defends you. Volunteers, stacked binders, teens drew flowcharts, like a science fair. They were determined to win pastors and teachers, and even a couple cops sat in the front row like human receipts. The judge asked why our records were so accessible, and I said, "Sunlight is cheaper than scandal." She smiled without meaning to, and the case went away. So yeah, we stood on the roof in late spring and watched a city that once tried to break me turn gold, he said. "You changed me," I said. "You changed the places." I could stand we didn't kiss because this isn't that story. We just stood still while the wind lifted the corner of that blue folder like it wanted to read along, and the win wasn't the speech or the gavel or the headline. The win was that kid's violin in a former storage closet, the eye roll and the whispered, "Can you help?" The simple fact that when folks tried to write me small, the work made their pen run out of ink. Now here's where I hand it to you, because the ending is a question on purpose. If a black woman from 63rd can pull a billionaire back from the edge and then drag a city into the light with a spreadsheet and a microphone, what's everybody else's excuse for cowardice? And what do we owe each other? When power swings wild and hits whoever's closest, was Vivian wrong? But human, or just wrong, is transparency a shield or a target? Would you have taken the job or told the rich man to do his own homework? Drop your truth in the comments. Argue with me. Argue with each other, respectfully. Tell me where you're watching from and what you've seen, because nothing changes until we drag our assumptions into the light and dare them to live there.